Oh boy, I sure do love Nintendo. Who would have guessed? Over my life, I've dedicated a lot of my time to collecting and studying stuff in the gaming industry. I mean, ask me anything, I own Despicable Me for the DS. And while I have a lot of passion for other companies, specifically Valve, PlayStation, not EA, Nintendo has always been one of my favorites. I would say in all my years of playing games, aka since I was a tiny dumb stupid baby, I'd given a good majority of my time to Nintendo, and Sega. I can't get that blue bastard out of my life. And one of the ways Nintendo was able to get their spot in the gaming industry they have today is because of a little game released in arcades back in 1981 known as Donkey Kong. How did you guys become a multi-billion-dollar company? Back in the 80s, Nintendo had the esteemed task of making a game based on Popeye. But due to some legal reasons or something, I don't know, does it look like I know anything about the law? Nintendo lost the rights to making a Popeye game. But they already had the game finished, which means a bunch of time had been wasted, so they took what they had and did a simple reskin, turning the fat guy into Donkey Kong, Popeye into Mario, or Jumpman in this game, and the woman into Pauline. I know absolutely nothing about Popeye. Also at this time, Nintendo released a game called Radar Scope, but the catch is, the game sucked and it failed. So Nintendo did this silly thing and panicked. Look at the stupid monkey game they had in the shop and said fuck it and replaced every Radar Scope cabinet with a Donkey Kong motherboard and decals. Donkey Kong was a massive success, way beyond Nintendo's other outings in the gaming industry, and it really helped influence how platformers were made today. But oh my god, I hate playing this game. Jumpman plays like a wet sponge in this game, which I guess makes sense because, look at him, but you have next to no precision while playing as this dude. But considering that this was the 80s and people had no standards, I mean, come on, this was the year Dukes of Hazzard was at its peak. We got a sequel to the original Donkey Kong the next year, being Donkey Kong Jr. I do not like Donkey Kong Jr. This game takes place after the events of the original Donkey Kong, where since Mario is pretty reasonably pissed off that Donkey Kong stole his girlfriend, he locks Donkey Kong in a cage and forces his son to rescue him. I just never really have liked this game that much. I don't fully understand the gameplay, and when I end up playing this game, I just end up feeling bad for Donkey Kong Jr. like his dad is kidnapped, man. The final entry in the Donkey Kong arcade trilogy ended in 1983 with the release of Donkey Kong 3, and what if I told you I f***ed with this game heavy? Donkey Kong has decided to move into this guy named Stanley the Bugman's greenhouse like a little rat, and Stanley must spray bug spray up his butt to get him out. What are you into, Donkey Kong? After Donkey Kong 3, Nintendo moved on to Mario more or less for the games, and for the most part left Donkey Kong in the dust, only re-releasing his games for the NES, as well as Donkey Kong Jr. Math. Hell yeah. But we as a society somehow went on without Donkey Kong for the next decade, but behind the scenes our savior was working on a fix to our biggest problem. In 1990, the company Rareware acquired the use of Silicon Graphics hardware, which in layman's terms made games look pretty damn good, and made a few tech demos and showed them off to companies, one being Nintendo. Nintendo was immediately impressed with this and saw the potential in games that could be made with this, so they gave Rare a list of IPs, mostly useless, that Rare could use, but one that mainly caught the eye of Rare was Donkey Kong. He was out of the bin and he was back. With this, the grand reboot of the Donkey Kong series was put into production, being Donkey Kong Country, and that was the beginning of my downfall. Donkey Kong Country released relatively late into the Super Nintendo's lifespan, being released in late 1994, closely approaching the release of the Nintendo 64. But Donkey Kong Country boasted its newfangled 3D-ish graphics using the Silicon Graphics computers, which in many ways looked significantly better than most PlayStation games, specifically earlier on, which turned what could have been just another Nintendo game into a worldwide craze because the cavemen around this time had no idea games could even look like this. Do you think they would have had a stroke if you showed them Ghost of Tsushima? But while a lot of games during this time may look good, at the end of the day, they themselves play kinda but Donkey Kong Country it's pretty f***ing awesome. Just like many of Nintendo's other popular franchises, this game is a 2D platform, but this game takes a vastly different approach to its gameplay than just another Mario game. In a game like Mario World, the gameplay is pretty simple. You can run, jump, spin, shrink when you take a hit, and go through obstacle course levels. But Donkey Kong Country's approach to its platforming is a very different and more realistic take. As realistic as a game where he plays a big gorilla and a chimp wearing a branded Nintendo hat can be. Donkey Kong does not have a run button, instead he gains speed as he runs, sort of like a Sonic game except nowhere near as fast because he's a big fat gorilla. To gain a small boost of speed, for a second you can pull off a roll which will allow you to go much faster and hit enemies in front of you, giving you an extra burst of speed for each enemy you hit. Sort of like roll jumping in Sonic, except a lot of Sonic comparisons in this game now that I think about it. I guess we had some Sonic fans here at Rareware. Do you think any of them went down a dark path like me? Donkey Kong's main attack is his ability to again roll, but also jump on the head of an enemy like Mario, but it's not as useful considering that rolling is a lot easier and just more fun to pull off. But you can also pick up barrels scattered around the levels and throw them at enemies, and this shit just looks rad as hell. And while it may not be super practical because it's a lot easier to just press the roll button, I just like throwing barrels at crocodiles. Donkey Kong doesn't control as precisely as a platformer like Mario or Sonic, but that works just fine because this game isn't trying to be like a Mario or a Sonic game, it's doing more of its own shit. Monkey shit. Bananas. The main plot of this game is that Donkey Kong, being a monkey, really fucks with bananas. So much so that he has a cave full of bananas, which makes me wonder, how do these things even stay ripe? Like, you would want to eat them all, but I don't want to get in this guy's monkey business. I need to stop. But this evil, obese crocodile named King K. Rool, the ruler of the Kremlings, the Society of Crocodiles, decides that he also fucks with bananas and steals them from Donkey Kong's horde. So Donkey Kong and his best friend Diddy go on a journey through the whole jungle to take their hundreds of thousands of bananas back. Now you may notice that this game really has nothing to do with the Donkey Kong series up to this point, where at the start Donkey Kong was portrayed more as a villain, but a victim for some reason. Donkey Kong Jr. never understood that. Here, while I wouldn't say Donkey Kong is a hero per se, he's not a bad guy, quite the opposite. But also besides Donkey Kong, every character here is new, introducing the villains like the Kremlings and Donkey Kong's best friend Diddy Kong. Terrible name in retrospect, Jesus. You also have some new characters here like Funky Kong, Cranky Kong, and Candy Kong, which I'll get to later, but what I'm going to say here is that Rare took the basic fundamentals of the Donkey Kong series and kind of made their own thing with it, which I really like. And while I think it would have been cool to get a full game taking what we already had in the arcade, I really love the changes made here, and it really helps Donkey Kong stand apart. Like, how did we go from jumping over barrels to a monkey with tits? And how am I supposed to feel? Even Donkey Kong himself received a pretty drastic redesign, making him more lanky and giving him a big necktie, so essentially he's an actual character design that isn't just a big gorilla. But this is because the Donkey Kong we see in this game isn't even the original Donkey Kong seen in those original arcade games. That is Cranky Kong, Donkey Kong's grandfather. You may assume this means that Donkey Kong is Donkey Kong Jr. all grown up, but no, it specifically states that Cranky Kong is Donkey Kong's grandpa, meaning that Donkey Kong Jr. is his dad and he had a kid. This guy fucked. It's believed that Donkey Kong Jr. is this odd-looking monkey shown in this old Nintendo Power magazine titled by fans as Fedora Kong, but who the hell knows, weird family tree. From me saying this, you may assume that I love the original Donkey Kong Country, which you would be right. I think this is an amazing game, but with how many times I've replayed this game, I've come to the conclusion that it's actually pretty flawed. This game did the classic unfair enemy and pit placement that so many other games did around this time with the excuse of it makes the game more replayable and adds extra length. But I've always hated this sort of level design. I love tough platformers. Celeste is one of my favorite games of all time, but I just think it's dumb and unfair to have enemies placed in front of you with no warning whatsoever, especially when you have such limited lives like games did during this time. And I think a lot of the gimmicks in this game kind of miss the mark and take what could have been a fine level and makes it last way too long, and it just makes it really annoying on a replay. Like in the level Loopy Rights, which is pretty close to the start of the game, it has these dumb lights that turn on and off, which determines when the Kremlings can move, sort of like red light, green light.
Red light! Green light! Yeah, nobody falling for that dumb.
Throughout the game, you're able to get hints from Cranky Kong. I read that as Cranking Hog. Throughout the game, you're able to get these hints from Cranky Kong, who is previously stated is the Donkey Kong from the original Donkey Kong arcade games. I obviously don't need these hints, this game is pretty simple, but the dialogue here is so funny because most of his dialogue just consists of him complaining about how games used to be so much better and how he hates these new fancy graphics and whatever. This is the type of stuff that makes me love Rareware games so much. This game is made to be a lot harder than pretty much all of Nintendo's other first-party platformers, which is obviously shown by the previously stated bullshit level design and placement in this game. But this game also has a very different damage system compared to any other game, as at most you can only take 2 hits before you lose a life. You have Donkey Kong of course, but also his friend Diddy who follows him wherever he goes, and you can swap between the two whenever you want, but the one you're controlling when you get hit, they'll die and you have to take control of the follower. There are barrels with revives scattered in the levels, but at the end they get surprisingly sparse, so you have to play it safe. What's cool about this game is it's able to do multiplayer very differently from pretty much any other game, where before you had to swap the controller when you died, you can now play as both Donkey Kong and Diddy Kong at the same time. I really love playing platformers in co-op because it lends itself to so much dumb fun and throwing each other into the abyss, but from what I've played with Donkey Kong Country, it doesn't really lend itself to a great multiplayer experience, but it was really new for the time and I really liked that. But also, like, stay away from me. Most of all, this game was clearly designed as a single-player experience like most other platformers were around this time, having pretty narrow levels as well as being released in 1994, so it's stuck with a 4:3 aspect ratio, so you're kind of just crammed together on the screen. One of this game's main gimmicks being very prominent on the box art is the animal buddies, which show up occasionally throughout the game. These are kind of like this game's power-ups from Mario, except they're placed a lot more sparsely and often used to get past certain gameplay obstacles that couldn't be done otherwise. Most notably, you have Rambi the Rhinoceros, who basically works as your invincibility, and you can barge through large hordes of enemies and it just looks raw as hell. You also have Onguard the Swordfish, who makes it a lot easier to traverse through water, but a lot of the animal buddies here work more the same, so I'm not going to spend a bunch of time on them. Like, you got Winky the Frog, who has a much higher jump, and Squawks the Parrot, who lets you fly and shit. I don't really know what I'm supposed to say. I like Rambi. One last thing I have to say about this game is that one thing that brings it all together is a soundtrack composed by Grant Kirkhope, who you may know as the guy who had such terrible pain in his testicles during the development of Banjo-Kazooie. They felt the need to put it in the game. He was able to make incredible atmospheric music for this game, fitting in each level environment nearly perfectly. Say the jungle music that's used in the first level. For the majority of the level, it's light drum beats that fade in and out with other instruments as it progresses, but once you get near the end of the level, all the instruments come together and create this big orchestral swing that goes like it's really cool. Or you have the aquatic ambience, which is just ear candy. It makes the water levels so much better. Overall, Donkey Kong Country to me is one of my favorite platformers ever, and that's saying a lot because all I play is f***ing Nintendo platformers. Really, it's an issue. Buy me games on Steam. I'm willing to admit this game's faults, and on a more critical view of this game, you can tear this game to shreds, like, why the hell's a monkey doing all this? And this is just such a fun platformer to run through, and things like the impressive for the time graphics really make this game special to me. In fact, I even think they still hold up today. Kind of. Alright, one last thing. Did you know that this game was originally supposed to be titled Donkey Kong Monkey Madness? That title is cool as f***, actually. With Donkey Kong Country being somewhat of a worldwide phenomenon with its fancy graphics and sexy gorillas, a sequel was almost immediately put into effect, where this time they could focus on the game itself and the foundation they had set. This game focuses less on Donkey Kong and rather Diddy Kong from the first game, being aptly titled Diddy Kong's Quest. It's a pun. I have reading comprehension. The plot of this game is a little more in-depth than the first game, that being since King K. Rool is pissed off that Donkey Kong stole his bananas back, he has kidnapped Donkey Kong and Diddy Kong must save him. I hate saying Diddy so much now. You guys ruined one of my favorite monkeys. And trust me, I have a lot. You're also introduced to a new Kong in this game, being Diddy Kong's girlfriend Dixie Kong, who has an ability where using her pigtails she can do a short hover in the air. It's not crazy useful, but it's a good move to pull off, and it makes her best to play as by default. Kinda not really. Although weirdly it's not as simple to switch characters as it was previously, being able to switch with the press of a button, now you gotta get hurt for one of the Kongs to switch. I don't really get the point. I get why this was implemented for like challenge reasons, but I also feel like this kind of makes the game a pain in the butt at some parts, and also they already made a compromise by making Dixie Kong take 2 hits with her normal jump to kill an enemy. Kinda dumb. Although Diddy Kong does show off his sick rapping skills whenever you beat a level in the game, so that's why I always play as him. He's too cool for the school. This game came out in 1995, by the way, just to put you in the time frame. This was when Michael Jackson was doing all those weird sexual moves. Not like that. The platforming for this game is actually a lot better than in the first game. They figured out how to get some of the bumps from the first game, and I would say that this game has some of the best levels and no truly bad ones. One thing many levels do in this game is change the philosophy of the gameplay, where instead of being a straight shot forward to reach the end of the level, you need to go up and through different portions of the level. This is most notable in the first world in the game, where you're on a pirate ship and you need to go around the sails. It really does help it stand out from a lot of other Nintendo games around this time, and I really like that, because holy shit, these things can blend together. One of my favorite things about these levels is they have a lot more themes compared to the first game. Where the first game mostly consisted of jungle-type themes, eventually becoming more industrial towards the end, this game switches to a more robust and interesting theme throughout every single world. When the game starts out, you're on these huge pirate ships, and then it eventually switches to the water itself, and then I don't even know to explain where you are. There's like these vines behind you, and it just looks cool. It gives off that college dorm aesthetic where you're growing shrooms out the window. This game is just a lot more colorful and vibrant, which I've stated many times in the past. I love when games are colorful and fun, and it's half the reason why my taste in video games is limited to dumb Sonic and Nintendo games. That is half a joke, help me. This game does suffer from many of the same faults as the first game, however, even for as much credit as I give this game for improving so much on what came before, it still has that good old 90s charm. By that, I mean hell at certain points. Just things like unpredictable enemies and falls to your death, which kind of make the game a pain in the ass for someone who's never played a game like that before. Me, I'm a seasoned virgin. I have played this game to death, although weirdly I have never 100% completed the game. I don't know, I just don't feel like it, but every few months I do pop in this game for a good time, if you know what I mean, because it's a good game and I enjoy playing the game. Perverts. I would even say this game's music is a step up in many ways. I would say I still like the first game's soundtrack a little more, but after replaying this game I tend to get certain melodies stuck in my head and hum them in my head, which is a good thing, I think. I did accidentally hum the bonus level theme during a big history test the other day. That was really embarrassing, actually. Holy shit. It even goes for more ambience in many parts, and while not something I would enjoy outside of playing the game, I still love it here, and it fits especially well in the levels where you're in an ice cave or deep in the jungle. Grant Kirkhope, my king. This game even goes more into the Rare charm I fell in love with them for. All the dialogue is so charming and fun, it really shows that Rare does not make games like all the other kids. They're about monkeys. Now all we have left is a final in the original trilogy of games being Donkey Kong Country 3 Dixie's Double Trouble. Fuck. Damn mouthful. This game is by far the game I have the least experience with here. I have definitely played it a few times, but I don't think I've ever actually taken the time to fully beat the game, rather just play for the first few worlds. That's not to say I have no experience with this game. I found this game at Goodwill for like $4 a long time ago and picked it up. I didn't even own a Super Nintendo at the time. I was just getting into retro gaming and hadn't ever picked up a Super Nintendo game before, so I just wanted to feel it, you know? And I ended up touching it a lot. Okay, now on to the game itself. This game has always been viewed as somewhat of the odd one out of the Donkey Kong Country games, taking its own spin on many pre-established things. A lot of the charm of the original Donkey Kong Country trilogy was a pseudo 3D graphics. But by the time this game released, we were already well into the Nintendo 64 generation where we had real 3D games. This game didn't really have the whole selling point of it looking nice because, I mean, we had like Mario 64. And sure, I would say the graphics here look a lot nicer than many early Nintendo 64 games, but with how big of a jump the Super Nintendo to the N64 was hardware-wise, a third entry into a 2D platforming series wasn't something many people were too interested in, besides the diehards like me. And I wasn't even alive when this game came out, so that says a lot. But none of this is to say that this game is bad. In fact, I would actually say that this may be one of the best Donkey Kong Country games. Maybe. I think the platforming scene in this game is some of the best in the series, and I'm being serious. They've already had 2 games to figure out the feel of these games, so now they're able to fully lay it out on the table and make a fully great game. Sometimes. They even fixed up Dixie Kong's controls, who takes center stage here along with new character Kiddy Kong, who I will get to in a second. They made it so she no longer takes 2 hits to normally kill an enemy, which is incredibly convenient, as well as making her hair glide a lot more useful. This game also introduces a brand new Kong to the series, being Kiddy Kong, who, as the name says, is a kid. A big kid. Alright, I'm just gonna go out and say it. I fucking hate Kiddy Kong, I fucking hate how he looks, and I fucking hate everything he stands for. I fucking hate Kiddy Kong! Sorry, I got a little fired up there. Now, I do like Kiddy Kong's addition to the plot, being that Dixie Kong is going to save Donkey Kong and Diddy Kong from King K. Rool, but she needs to babysit her baby cousin, so she just takes him with her on an adventure with killer crocodiles and stuff. But otherwise, stop making me look at it. I hate Kiddy Kong, okay? I just hate his face. Playing as Kiddy Kong is so slow, dude. I get it, he's big, but playing as him is such a drag. Like, fuck this baby. Not like that. I guess it's a good motivation to not get hit as Dixie Kong because you don't want to play as a stupid baby, but when you do get hit, it is so slow, it is so boring, and to get the barrel to get Dixie Kong, it is more worth your time to just kill yourself. I do not like this fucking baby, dude. It struck a nerve. He also just has a dumb look on his face, and I hate it. Is that a good criticism? I also just feel like this game is pretty basic compared to the first 2 games, while still having elements of the Rareware charm to it. This game just kind of feels like a basic platformer at the end of the day, which is more than fine. I love basic platformers for what they are, but at the end of the day, I will always take a fun game that stands apart from the rest compared to one that may be better, and at many points this game just feels like it's a by-the-books platformer, and I don't read books. And I feel like at this point, especially at the release of the N64, we were getting tired of platformers like this because we already had these new fancy 3D games to look at. Why would we want to play Donkey Kong? Why would I want to play Donkey Kong? Wait. Sorry, I took my meds. Crisis over. Gotta get back to Donkey Kong. And even in the hindsight that this game is probably better than the majority of the early 3D games, it's no surprise that people would rather play Pilot Wing 64 than the third entry into a Donkey Kong series. Little did they know there was a lot I would play besides Pilot Wing 64. But like I said, I like this game. I like this game a lot, in fact, but I feel like at this point the Donkey Kong style of platforming was getting a bit old. And even for as much as I love these games, they in no way play nearly as versatile as a Mario game where you need nowhere near the amount of skill to get good with. Donkey Kong just has a lot more weight to him, which makes the platforming a lot more difficult than Mario, although I do feel like Mario should have some more weight to him, like, what? So a lot of level tropes end up repeating themselves, so they have to introduce new gimmicks, which some are great, but then others, let's just say, aren't. In all honesty, some of my favorite parts in this game are the few levels where you don't play as Dixie or Kiddy Kong and only control an animal buddy, since it's able to break general rule conventions, allowing for a more creative level without being repetitive because, well, it's one level. For example, early in the game you play as an elephant who's scared of enemies, so you need to carry barrels through around certain points to kill an enemy without touching it. That's actually really creative. And yes, this would be beyond annoying if a whole game were designed that way. This level is just a quick level with dozens of them, and I really like that. This game also just looks a little muted, if that makes any sense. I wouldn't say it looks bad, but I would just prefer to look at the first 2 games compared to this. And also, my biggest gripe with this game, and I know this is gonna sound stupid, but it's that Grant Kirkhope did not compose the music for this game. And for me, the music in the first 2 games kind of strung it all together, so it's really disappointing that he did not make the music for this game. That's not to say the music in this game is bad, it's quite good, but it just does not have the same feel like you're exploring through the jungle or some caves like from the original games. It just kind of feels like, I don't know, music. It also just does not have the same memorability of those games. I often find myself humming music from specifically the first Donkey Kong Country in my head, but here, outside of the main theme, I really can't remember anything about the music. And I know it sounds like I'm completely shitting on this game, and if you want to take it that way, then go ahead, but I actually really like this game. Just not as much as the others. I guess there's just a lot more to complain about here, especially for it being the 3rd entry in the series. Getting a little stale now. My main problem is Kiddy Kong, by the way. Although this game may have introduced one of the greatest characters not just in gaming, but in fiction. Swanky Kong. This was his only appearance. Actually, sorry, he's in the background of Mario Superstars Baseball. Thought you'd appreciate this knowledge. I think we need to start a petition to bring back Swanky Kong. All in favor, drop your credit card information along with your full name in the comments, and do not forget the 3 numbers on the back. Thank you. The Donkey Kong Country Trilogy are some of my favorite games of all time. Definitely from this era. I'm not sure why, but I've always had a weird love for Donkey Kong. He's always been like the weirdly abused stepchild in Nintendo's roster of franchises, but with Rare and their trilogy of games, it gave love to the series it had never really had before or even since. After Donkey Kong Country 3, the last mainline Donkey Kong game Rareware ever made was Donkey Kong 64, which in terms of collectathons, has its issues, but I do love it. But sooner than later, Rareware was bought out by Microsoft, and they lost the rights to use Donkey Kong, meaning they couldn't really insert their charm or love into the series anymore. After this, the series stayed pretty stagnant for years until they got a quick duology of Donkey Kong games made by Retro Studios, which in many ways are better than the original trilogy, but they lack the Rareware charm, which I love so much. Although to make it clear, Donkey Kong Country Tropical Freeze is like the best platform of all time. Actually play that game is great. After making jokes about Donkey Kong for years, I'm really happy to finally be able to show my love for the series in a bigger way that isn't just a classic funny monkey joke. Although I have made plenty of those today. But with Rareware unable to touch the series ever again, it's kind of like the end of a great era to me, which is why I will always give them the love they deserve. Not you guys.